Okay, I believe we're live.
All right. And you don't see Arnie?
No, not yet.
Okay. We'll go ahead and get started then.
Okay. Mike, did you have anything you wanted to talk about before I jump right in?
Other than just, if everybody saw the Friday letter, I'm sure you saw that there's still a lot of questions about the budget, the current budget runs. A lot of concerns. Meg and I both had regional meetings today, and those concerns continue with the way that they bunch some aid together and what the current budget runs mean in the long term. In the short term as a district, they look promising, but the long-term effects are being ironed out. So more to come on that as we get down the road. Did I hit that right on the head, Meg?
Sounds good.
Okay. No, I'll turn it over.
Okay. We want to talk first about workman's comp. The district participates with, I'm not sure, Rhonda, you can probably quote the exact name, but better than I can, but it's a consortium with other school districts for workman's comp insurance. I'm not sure how long the district has been with them. Just as part of turning over all the different rocks we can, we went out and got some quotes for workman's comp insurance. I had sent you an email that basically summarized. Can you see my screen?
No, not yet.
Okay.
We did for a minute, but then it came back down.
How about now?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so this summarizes two quotes that we got from Comp Alliance and PERMA for our comp insurance, and you'll see that Comp Alliance, they're pretty close, one at just over 47,000 and one at almost 46,000, so they're very close. Currently, we pay over $100,000 a year for workman's comp insurance, and our the budget information we were given next year indicates that our premium for next year, if we stay where we are, would be $111,000. I think, Rhonda, as you're well aware, and Paul, you may or may not be, the way the current consortium is set up, each year, they track losses for a district as well as their premiums paid, and they track sort of what the paid-in capital of each of the participating districts is. A number of districts have left the consortium over the last couple of years, and they'd received notice that Maine Endwell is going to be leaving effective next year as well. The way it works is when a district withdraws from the consortium, they're able to take the balance of their capital less sum that's retained for runoff of claims with them. So we'd be looking at, if we switched, paying less than $50,000 in premium next year versus 111 if we stayed. And the amount of districts paid in capital that would potentially be paid out to us is in the neighborhood of $700,000. Paul, your eyes just kind of got big.
It's a big number.
It is a big number, and we'd certainly have to figure out how to deal with that moving forward, because we're already at a point where fund balance is high in some people's view, and managing that. So we'd have to, really think about that. But I wanted to talk about the potential of a change with the Finance Committee and see what your thoughts were. I reached out, I'm just going to switch here for a minute. I asked our current, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
All right. I'm just going to search for an email here. I asked our current broker, what their thoughts were on the two. And I'm just going to try and find his, bear with me for a second, his email. He basically said, I would say they're very similar in most ways. We've always worked very closely with PERMA because they had better service, loss control, and mainly administrative. Over the last few years, Comp Alliance has done a lot of work to improve this. They've had some positive turnover in certain key employees and have really improved their administrative services. We've moved some of our public entity clients to them and feel strongly confident that they can provide the services that we expect from our insurers. That being said, we've had others stay with PERMA or we've placed with PERMA. That's kind of the history of our relationship with both insurers. We generally like to look at premium as a whole. So he was pretty confident with both. I also reached out just to another contact that does a lot of insurance, municipal and school district, and just to see what their thoughts were on the two carriers. I would say they leaned a little more towards the Comp Alliance option than PERMA, but didn't, weren't negative necessarily about PERMA.
Now, Meg, I mean, I've attended the meetings and I don't have the full history of when we started with the, not Comp Alliance, but the consortium. What services are we getting now that we may be losing if we go with one of these other two companies?
I can't think of anything, Missy really deals with any day-to-day administration of comp more than I do. And I just chatted with her and I said, if we consider making a change, is there anything that jumps out to you that you'd be concerned about? Are you thinking, oh gosh, we were with this company before and it was a nightmare or anything like that? And she said, no, she says, they're certainly adequate with what we're having now. She does online filing if we have a claim and it works well. Comp Alliance did, not Comp Alliance, the current consortium did have engage a safety partner to sort of go through and do reviews with the districts to see if there's any risk, areas where they can mitigate risk or things that they could put in place to help. I didn't find those services particularly effective. I didn't find it a good use of our time. And I think those same services would be available from either of these providers.
Okay.
For more than a 50% discounted premium.
I was just gonna say that, Paul.
Yeah, because that's my head is where Rhonda's was. It seems like, with the two carriers coming in within $1,000 of one another, that gives you an idea of really what our premium should be. And so unless there were a compelling reason or a lot of additional services offered that we would be sacrificing, I just.
Well, and the budget, if you look at the budget from the consortium, we're paying for an administrator salary, we're paying for an attorney's salary, which we already have an attorney, and the administration would be our own, I'm assuming, where Missy's already doing that already, filing the claims and stuff. So yeah, now when is the deadline for us to, if we were to go to that direction, when's the deadline that we can withdraw from the consortium?
Coming up quickly. I believe we have to notify them by March 1st.
Okay.
So I guess my question would be, my personal opinion is I would lean towards Comp Alliance. The premium is slightly higher, but the reason that I would say I would lean towards Comp Alliance is because it's managed by Right Risk. They're the ones that actually manage the program and the claiming, and Right Risk is the same company that manages NYMER and NYSER. So we know who they are. I have a level of comfort with them, that they run a good program, and we know that obviously, given their history supporting that, running the NYMER and NYSER programs, we just know that they're a firm foundation, I guess.
Now, is that a 2-year rate that they quoted, or was that an annual rate? I just don't want to go into something and then get a huge rate the following year.
I believe PERMA's rate had the potential for a 2-year rate. I don't think that Comp Alliance gave us a 2-year option. I'm just looking here.
The advantage to this, where this would be a little bit more stable too, is because they have our history. So they've seen our history, and our history is very good in this area, much different than insurance, where when we left New York 44, we didn't have any experience rating or any details to go in. So, and then they changed the law with a 3-year agreement, and now we have a 1-year experience rating. So this is a much different insurance side because our experience rating is sitting there for multiple years.
I could go back and ask if they would give us a year, if they'd be willing to give us a year 2 quote, but I also feel like they'd have to increase it a whole heck of a lot to get up to 111,000.
Right. Now, the 700,000 potential withdrawal that we would have through the consortium, would it be beneficial to roll that over into a reserve just for workers' comp premiums? Or is that allowed? I know we have there's several restrictions on reserves.
Right. So a workman's compensation reserve is an allowable reserve, but I think that's only if you self-insure.
Okay.
I can confirm that, but that's my understanding on this little cheat sheet I have from Questar.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if there's something gray there where they consider a consortium like going through Comp Alliance. Is that considered self-insured? Because we're not going through like the New York State Insurance Fund. Would they consider that a form of self-insurance? I'd have to check on that.
Okay.
And even so, let's say we could, I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting it all in there because I think we have
Right.
other areas that we could use. But I can check on that.
Okay.
Other than answering those two questions about a second year premium quote and a workman's comp reserve, other thoughts before we move this on to the whole board? And should I come back to you guys before we move it forward for the second meeting in February? I mean, really, that's our last chance to.
I think if
Do
you
you
could
wanna
just
revisit-
follow up by with an email to
Okay.
these outstanding items, that would be fine. I don't think we have to all get back together.
Right.
Is anyone concerned with moving forward with Comp Alliance, going that direction as opposed to PERMA?
No, I mean, I've heard of Comp Alliance, I guess more frequently than I had PERMA, but I have no preference.
Okay, all right, I will look into both of those things and follow up.
And with our board meeting next week, this is kind of pretty timely. So if we can get if we get the answers and responses by next week, the committee will be reporting out on this discussion. So that kind of opens the door for a larger discussion with the full board.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
likely
I
a
would-
decision to result.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with going forward with bringing everything to the board next week. Because the questions that I had would not necessarily hold me up either way, because like you said, they would have to go up a considerable amount the following year,
Yeah, that's $50,000 to $60,000 of elasticity around the new Comp Alliance premiums. So that's
And,
that's
you know,
material.
going back to the conversation about the underlying right risk under Comp Alliance, it is not right risk's MO to quote low and then jump you up the next year. That's just not what they do. And so if we did go up a lot the following year, it would be based on experience, us having some sort of a claim, which would cause our premiums to go up no matter who we were with.
right?
I just don't think that right risk operates that way. You know, they're not undercutting it just to get the business. I don't think that's their style.
Good. All right.
Okay. The next item that I wanted to talk to you about was related to our property insurance. So currently, our property insurance deductible is $1,000. And one of the things that was recommended to me or mentioned to me when we actually quoted our insurance last year, and it was recommended by actually the nicer representatives, not by our current insurance carrier. And they said, you know, Meg, you guys have had really good property insurance experience. You might want to consider increasing your deductible so that you saved on premium. So just to kind of walk you through this, this is our current deductible at 1,000, and here's several scenarios. What if it was 5,000, 10,000, 25,000? And it shows what our current property insurance premium is at 28,304. And then what the new premium would be if we increase the deductible to those various levels. So it shows you that, you know, at the 5,000 level, we'd save $3,700 a year and across. And then I calculated what you would save over 5 years. And then if we applied our history and said that typically, you know, our history has been, we might have 2 claims over a 5-year period that exceed the deductible. So what would it cost us in the increased deductible in these various scenarios? And then what would the net impact? So, you know, the most favorable scenario in my mind here is going to a $5,000 deductible where you have the potential of $18,000 in premium savings, a little more exposure on deductible, but a net savings of $8,600. Below that, I did the same analysis, but I said, what if our experience suddenly got worse? What if we had 4 claims over 5 years as opposed to 2? So let's double it. And, you'll see here that we obviously have more paid out in our our premium savings aren't any different, but we have more paid out in deductible. And if you still look at that 5,000 scenario, like we're saying, in a more catastrophic situation, yes, we end up going in the negative, but I think the chances of having that many more large claims on a year-to-year basis are slim. So I think a $5,000 premium gives us the most ability for premium savings with the least expansive exposure if our experience really changed a lot. The other thing that I was thinking about in conjunction with this is, say we decided to go that route, my recommendation would be to bite off a little bit at a time and go to the $5,000 deductible level. We do have a property loss reserve, and I'm pretty confident, it says for uninsured losses, and I'm pretty confident I could confirm with Bob Schofield that your deductible is a portion that's uninsured. So that's another area where we could utilize that reserve and have those funds should we need to meet the deductible if we had a. So I wanted to get the committee's thoughts on increasing the deductible, and we have some funds in the property loss reserve currently. I can tell you exactly how much in a second. It's only $9,600 currently, but again, if we have $700,000 coming in and we need to know where we're going to put that, this is a place that we could put $50,000 and it would cover 10 deductibles, and then we'd see the premium savings every year on our.
We have about 9,000 in there, you said?
9,600, yes.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking like a huge savings there with the 5,000, but I mean, it's a savings is a savings. And who knows what the future is gonna, bring us with the state aid and, everything else that's going on there. So I thank you for doing that. I think that's great. I would agree with the 5,000 as well.
And I do have to say, I can't take credit for this because this wasn't my idea. It really came from when I had the Nicer Folks quote our insurance last year. And interestingly, when I got the quote for Utica National, I said, did you look at anything where we might be able to lower our premium? And they're like, no, we didn't really. So, Mike and I have talked about it, and I'd like to re-quote our insurance this year and, consider changing, just because I don't think we always get the best customer.
Right.
So we'll probably be back at you. And this is an example of that. This is where they proactively said, where can you, how can we modify your insurance a little bit to help things? So I will get an answer to confirm that we could use the property loss reserve to cover deductibles when needed. And if indeed we can, I will move forward with a recommendation to establish this reserve, as well as the teacher's retirement that we talked about the last meeting that's going to be on the agenda for the next Board of Ed.
All right, sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, and I agree with Rhonda. While it doesn't look like a large savings, I mean, if we pick up a few $3,700 savings, I mean, that's what we've got to find it where we can. And it also gives us more credibility when we go out with a budget. We're constantly looking to sharpen our pencils. So that's good. Thank you.
Right.
Yep. Okay. I'm just opening this so that I can rotate my screen. Okay, let me share again. Try to. I wanted to revisit state aid a little bit, as Mike had mentioned. This is just another sheet that I created that, I don't know if I can, looks at state aid a little differently than what Mike sent you, and it kind of breaks it down. So it shows what we actually got in state aid in the various categories for 1920 in this column here. It shows what we budgeted for 2021 this year and what I'm thinking we'll actually get this year. And then here, this breaks down the executive budget. So let's just go through them line by line quickly. Foundation aid stays pretty much the same. Public excess cost aid is, they've projected a slight increase from what we're looking at, 311 to 350. It's about the same as what was what we budgeted for this year. We have had some changes in both the students that we can claim excess cost for, and we've had some of them leave. And our threshold for what our excess costs have to be above, continues to increase. So I'm not confident in reality that we would receive all this 350. So I think that might be a little high. Building aid, you'll see here is up about $70,000, and that's a result of anticipated return on our capital outlay project. So that's exactly why we did this. That's what we've talked about. High tax aid is exactly the same. Transportation aid is estimated at $1,170,000. If you'll see here, this year it was estimated at $1,065,000, which was lower than the executive budget. I budgeted less, and we're actually anticipated to only receive $860,000. A lot of that is due to our decreased transportation costs from when we were closed and events, and athletics and, different things that didn't happen. I'm not confident that we would receive this whole $1,170,000 because a lot of that is based on estimated expenses, some of which don't always happen. BOCES aid, yeah.
Sorry, is that anticipated 866? Does that include the change where they're funding it now in the spring, where they weren't initially?
No,
So
but I don't think that it will increase.
Some.
Yeah, it will increase. So what Mike's talking about is, well, actually, Mike, half and half. So the state has said that they won't fund the cost of keeping staff on and they also wouldn't fund the cost of delivering meals and homework packets. So this does not, that estimate reflects not counting our mileage, which plays into our aid ratio of any miles we drove in the spring, but it does include the entire salary for all of the staff. So I don't know if they're going to come back on that and say, we're not going to pay their full, we're not going to aid on their full salary during the time that you were closed. Because they said it doesn't cover keeping them on standby. Now, I don't know if they're only referring to like contractual transportation in that scenario, or if they won't pay for salaries of people when they weren't working.
Right. And I know that's a big debate right now because as we know in the CARES Act, when that came out in the orders last spring, they said to the best of your ability, maintain. And that's what districts did. So that's up for discussion, but that should potentially go, well, so we don't know. It could go up, could go down.
Yeah, right. Okay. There are certain pieces of this that are not yet final.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I lost my tab here. Too many tabs open, too small of a screen. Good Lord. All right. Let me try that again. Oh, bear with me, I'm sorry.
No, it's my fault. I derailed you. I shouldn't have done it.
I'm glad that we did retain them, because could you imagine delivering all those meals and if those bus drivers found other positions,
Yep.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand perfectly the rationale of why we did it, or exactly, or trying to have bus drivers this year when we're back,
Right.
Same sort of thing. All right. Let me try this again. All right. BOCES aid is estimated at $1,000,004. It'll probably be, I think it'll be probably more than we're getting this year, but a little less than what they project, because sometimes there's some expenses in there that we don't end up spending all of it. The next one's textbook aid, software aid, library aid, hardware aid. Those are primarily an amount per student enrolled, so those are pretty set in stone, but you will see they've decreased slightly, I think, because of the decrease in enrollment. The adjust to executive budget of $127,000. What that has to do with is the governor's proposal to take all of these service aid categories, which are based on different formulas and different rates of reimbursement, and lumping them all together into one conglomerated calculation of services aid. And when he does that, the impact on different districts is different. Some districts, they receive more aid, some districts receive less aid. And the impact of his proposed consolidation of all those types of aid is an actual reduction for Walton of about $127,000 in aid. So if you look at just these aid categories year to year, the budget, it's pretty consistent to last year's budget with some overall slight increases. The biggest one and the most identifiable one, obviously, being the building aid issue. Where it gets really interesting is down here, this additional potential aid. So what they've identified for Walton is an additional potential aid of 1.6 million related to the COVID stimulus, but they're also doing a funding adjustment. And that funding adjustment ends up being the lesser of your COVID-19 supplemental stimulus or the amount of your STAR reimbursement. So in some districts, they might see their stimulus subtracted by their stimulus and their net impact is zero. But for us, our STAR reimbursement is less. So our local district funding adjustment is $674,000. So the net result is an additional $937,000 of aid to the district. That's great.
And there's a,
But where it becomes complicated is that's not going to be there forever. So again, it creates a funding cliff. And from what I'm hearing, Mike, you can add to this if not, their additional COVID stimulus is going to go away. But under the governor's proposal, the local reduction doesn't go away. That stays with us in perpetuity. And that COVID stimulus is not intended just to get us through 2021. That may have to span the next several years. Mike, chime in, elaborate.
A couple things that he has done. One, he reinstituted the first COVID reduction, and then he put the new the round 2 stimulus in this, moved it all to the next budget cycle, and then underneath that umbrella, almost, and I'm going to talk frank because I tend to, with almost a bait and switch, look at all the stimulus money. And now we're going to take STAR and we're going to push the STAR expense down to the local district. And then when that stimulus money goes away, we're sitting here with that reduction long term. The STAR and the itemized grouping of aid categories they were identified immediately as large concerns all the way up to the commissioner and the board of regents. And it is every advocacy group you can imagine is all over this. No idea where this came from. Came out of the blue. It's like he threw everything at it because he could throw some money out there that's for the CARES Act and use it to cover other reductions and long-term effects that he has wanted to do. So there's a big battle going on that. The round 2 stimulus, he had over 2 years to utilize it. So this has to span 2 years. Megan, that's what you're talking about. So this year and this coming year's budget, 21-22, 22-23, he had till 22 to give it. So we need to take a look at how we can juggle this, because we're going to have that cliff, and that cliff could potentially be much larger than the initial cliff that I was worried about. It was 540 initially that he had taken back. Yep. And now he's thrown this in here of the 990. He's showing us the STAR, which is a $600 and some $1,000 potential stay on, and those other itemized reductions of $100 and some thousand. So now we're at $700,000-$800,000 of a potential reduction long term. Again, this is the executive budget. They're doing the hearings. Rural Schools is testifying tomorrow in front of the Senate, in front of the budget hearings, and it's hitting all the points that we're talking about and more. And then the legislative budget will come out. The governor, my understanding, has 2 opportunities to amend his executive budget. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here over time.
And that's interesting with that STAR, because I'm assuming that 674 is based on last September's STAR balance. So with that being said, the number of properties that have changed hands and the number of STARs that, because he had changed the way that STAR is handled now. If you purchase a property after 2014, you don't get a reduction off of your school tax bill. You have to wait for a check to come in the mail to you. So if that number decreases, I guess that could benefit us in a way.
I don't know that it's gonna change or he's gonna update it, Rhonda. I don't know how that's gonna work.
Okay.
And in looking, I just looked quickly, it's not this year's star number or last year's star number. I think part of it is he's basing it on basic star where some people might have enhanced. So I think that might be why I can't quickly tie it into our number.
Okay.
Ours was like more like it was over 700,000 this year and last year.
Okay.
So.
So a couple other things regarding the aid runs, they based this on the $6 billion stimulus. That's where he did his runs on the worst case scenario. I don't know what that means if we get the best case scenario. I really don't. And I don't know what it means with I was looking at President Biden's plan. Who knows what would come through if anything comes through, but he has a very large sum coming in for reopening of schools, student recovery, which would be credit recovery, additional nurses, things of that nature, and then some grant funding. So I don't see the reopening of schools in our situation in New York State and our situation. I don't know if we'd be in that targeted group. So I'm it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of any stimulus that comes down for round 3. So this round 1 and round 2, what we've got in front of us and whatever comes out of this budget is something we're really going to have to pay attention to how we handle it over the next 2 to 3 years.
Right.
And I think fund balance, the desired threshold on fund balance, when we have these cliffs hanging over our head the way we do, they're going to have to. I don't know of any district that's going to worry about that threshold during these situations. This is crisis time. They can come in and write us up, and there's certainly a justification when we have a pandemic and we have to recover from it over 2 to 3 years.
Right.
Mike and I haven't really talked about it, but what I want to try to do with the approach to this budget is I want to try to keep whittling things down to the point that our budget balance, we can get as close to as we can to like the top lines of that state aid scenario that I showed you without really counting on or relying on the pandemic adjustment. And if that comes through and we have additional funds for that, great, we can apply it where appropriate. We can maybe do some things that we didn't otherwise plan on, but we may at the end of the day have a budget where we have to rely on a portion of it, but I don't want to have a budget where we're really relying on and counting on every penny in that pot, particularly because we've got to spread it over a couple of years and we don't know what next year is going to look like. But I want to squeeze the budget as much as we can to get as close to the normal aids as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Who knows what we're going to get hit with when we do return to some normalcy. What was it? 3 years ago, we were talking a lot more about mental health and how the school districts are trying to take on a bigger responsibility of that because of what we're experiencing within the school districts, with our students, staff, and that the pandemic has just, escalated that, beyond measure right now, as far as I'm concerned. So you're right. We really need to rely on a fund balance. Who knows what we're going to get hit with when we do return to some sort of normalcy.
Yeah, and we already know as a district that we have a need for additional assistance outside of what our school counselors are able to do because they're not clinically trained,
right?
And they don't have that reach out. That's why we got mental health in, but that's a limited capacity. What school districts are moving to are full-time social workers, even if it's shared within the district, and we're currently exploring that option and exploring to see what we can do within some funding scenarios or some things that we may be able to do with a social worker, depending on the level regarding Medicaid. It could help offset some costs and different things as well. So we're looking at everything with that as in mind right now. We're not waiting. We've heard that loud and clear from the community, from the board, from everyone that we need to be looking now.
So speaking of fund balance, that was the next thing that I wanted to talk about. Just wanted to share this spreadsheet. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, just to give you an update of where we're at. Let me draw your attention to this assigned unassigned ending fund balance. And it just shows you over the last couple of years what that number has done. And it's been, it's grown a little, but remained flat most recently. And then the limit is 4%, and you'll see here what percent we've been at. So while we've done some things like creating the capital reserve to help address that, we've really just been holding the line on what we have as excess. We've mentioned before that last year, because of the closure, we actually had a $286,000 surplus. And so that, added to our fund balance. We would have seen this number go down some had it not been for that surplus, but that kind of kept us flat. The red here is what remains to be seen for this year. We don't know how this year is going to end, now that we're hearing that we will likely get all of our aid, but yet we've reduced some expenditures. We may very well be looking at a surplus again. We do have some expenditures that weren't budgeted for, such as the settlement with New York 44 and things like that. So I plan over the next several weeks to kind of take a look at that and get an estimate of where I think we're going to end the year. So these numbers are the same in the 2021 column because we don't know what's going to go in that red box yet. So this is what we're trying to manage. And if we do get an additional $700,000 payout for leaving the consortium, obviously that's going to add to this number. And we'll need to continue to talk about how to manage that. I think that given that there's so much unknown, and we said this last year at the same time, we may just need to accept being above 4% for another year or two. We can proactively do things to manage it, like putting money in the various reserves we've talked about. But we may just have to also accept that we're letting it ride over 4% to be sure we're adequately prepared for what might come.
Right.
What side note, but it just popped into my head. So, well, I'll mention it in a minute when we go on reserve, but I don't know if anybody has any questions on that.
No, I think that was good. Thank you.
So I think it's just, I think we should look at this periodically. I think it's a good idea for us to look at where we are with fund balance, where we've been. We certainly need to keep an eye on it.
Paul, I can't see you, so if you do have something to say, just speak up. I can only see this shared screen.
The last thing I wanted to share was just this report that I put together. A lot of districts have sort of a fund balance report, and some of them are, have a lot of verbiage in them that reserve report. Some of them have a lot of verbiage that talk about their philosophy related to reserves and things like that. And this is certainly something that we can expand upon in the future, but I just thought it was a start to sort of report to you as the finance committee, what we currently have in reserve funds. So it's sort of, there's some blanks here, obviously, but it goes over the reserve funds we currently have. The one for property loss, which I mentioned, is we may be able to use to cover deductibles. Employee benefit reserve, that really is only used to cover payout of benefits to employees for like accrued leave time upon their separation from the district.
Mm-hmm.
We have a reserve for unemployment insurance and our capital reserve. We would be adding to this at the next meeting our retirement reserve. And I think I had mentioned to you at our last meeting, the retirement reserve was only allowed to be established for ERS contributions. But in some more research and some back and forth with Bob Schofield, we found that it's also allowed for TRS with certain limits. So the resolution is drafted in a way to set up both.
Okay.
So this is just really informational so that you can see what we have, and periodically on an annual basis or more often, particularly as we're putting more money in reserves, for the board to be able to see sort of what we have, what its purpose is. And I think it also provides some accountability for our reserves, that we're not just stashing money here, there, and everywhere, that we have a plan, we have we identify what it's going to fund, things like that.
And that's preferred, but it's not required by the comptroller's office or anything, right?
No, there is not a requirement that that you must have this, but I do think that if they came in and looked at your reserve funds and saw that you were putting in money in them, they might say, do you have a management plan for your reserve? It's not, I think it would be very anticipated for them to ask for one, but it's not oh, you must, it's not dictated in law or filed anywhere periodically.
No, and I like that we would do that. I just wasn't sure if it was a requirement that, then we did have to adhere to a predetermined format or something where it had that preamble that you mentioned or whatever, what kind of our guiding mission for reserve accounts were. So,
I mean, maybe I'm more wordy than I think I am, but I tend to be like nuts and bolts. And so some of that was just, extra fluff that, okay, it's great to say it's 10 pages long, but in just trying to get
No.
it started, I didn't.
function over form. I'm
Okay.
good with that.
Two items that popped into my head that I didn't put on the agenda, but Mike and I had talked about. One was just wanted to give you an update on the timeline for health insurance. That's a huge unknown that's affecting our budget. We've been working with ENV and they continue to work to get some different quotes. They are looking to get some more information back on digging deeper from Excelis, as well as some information on our 65 plus plan. I don't think we'll hear from them until mid to late February. They seemed to think they needed some more time. One thing that did happen is I had mentioned to you before that Excelis kind of very preliminarily said that our rate increase would look around 33%. ENV did look at other options and they found a self-funded health insurance option where the increase would be about 15%. So I don't have all the details of what that self-funded option looks like, but what they did do is they took that option back to Excelis and said, okay, we have another option that's going to result in a 15% increase. So what else can we do here? Just to try and see if we can scrape a little more off the proposed Excelis renewal. So we continue to work on health insurance and I think it has a huge impact on where we are with the budget, but we don't have details for you at this point.
And how did they price out that self-insured option? I mean, based upon our current experience, and would there be any safety net, like a reinsurance component or something to that? Or
I
would we
believe there
absorb
is.
all? Okay.
I think there is a stop loss kind of thing. She did also say that I think United had declined to quote given our recent experience. So we got some pros and some cons going on there. We're continuing to pick away at it. I mean, I think Excelis is saying that it's early for them to be quoting, they feel like it's early for them to be quoting a July renewal. So I think they're dragging their feet a little bit on giving some definitive information. She did also say that our preliminary numbers, our experience numbers in December look a little bit better than the prior months. So she's hoping that if that trend continues, that a couple months aren't quite as scary, maybe that would help in a renewal as well.
All right.
And then just, where do we go from here as far as budget development? We had talked at the last meeting, there was a lot of unknowns. We still have a lot of unknowns, but we've narrowed it down some. We had on the budget calendar a tentative public forum for the second. I guess, next steps, where do we want to go? Do we want to just keep meeting with this group? Is it time to update the entire board? When do we want to have a public forum? Those sorts of things.
I think it's time to update the entire board. And maybe we could do that in sort of like a public forum, but during our meeting to do a recap. We can advertise it that, there'll be an update, a preliminary update on the budget. Is that something that we could hold off to? We have a second meeting in February, right?
Uh-huh.
That's what the
16th.
The 16th?
Mhm.
Is that something that we could possibly do then?
My feeling, I mean, what do we hope to ascertain from a public forum? We want to get what the public's priorities are with regard to the district, right? I mean, that's
It's
primarily
typically what we ask for,
and right now we are working with kind of a lot of uncertainties, too many variables in the equation to even determine how we accomplish our priorities. I mean, we have to establish kind of our baseline, and we're walking along picking up dollars, which is great, but we also don't know what's coming in from the state and things like that. So, I mean, before I think we can hear what the public's priorities are, I think we have to establish, kind of what we're working with and what's even possible.
Well, right. And I wasn't suggesting that we go out with, or actually ask the public, if we have to make cuts, where do you want us,
Okay.
to act, that type of conversation. I was just kind of, get the ball rolling that, we are in the process of budget discussions, at this early of a stage, but because there are so many uncertainties. They're going to see it at the meeting anyways, but I don't know if we necessarily need to call it a public forum. But I think it would be an opportunity to let the board, we agreed that our meetings were going to be via Zoom. So to give them the opportunity to see what is going on and what we're anticipating at this early of a stage, to let the board see that. The public, will see that as well, but I don't know as if we really need to call it a public forum at that time.
And that's what my feeling is if you call it a public forum, then certainly people would have the ability to send the BOE email address or, whatever, some thoughts or things like that. But I don't think it has to be a separate meeting, maybe just an extension of our current meeting where we're informing the board. But if you call it a public forum, it's basically a solicitation of, public feedback and things like that, where this is going to be more of a presentation, a kind of one-way presentation as to where we are currently. And, some of the things that we're looking to tighten up before we put, the final touches on the budget.
Yeah, I agree with that, Paul. The word presentation, is more accurate. So, and then I don't have my schedule in front of me, unfortunately. I'm sorry. But when, oh, yes, I do. 2021. Community Budget Forum, tentatively, it was February 4th, and then the next one is April 7th. Right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what calendar you're looking at. On mine, I have it as March 30th.
Oh, yes, yes, sorry,
That's
2020.
okay.
So March 30th is the second one. Okay.
We do have if you look at that calendar, like March 16th is a board meeting budget discussion topics in mid-March. So, I guess the update could be fairly high level, similar to this one and the last one. Expenses are going up, anticipated to go up this amount if we just carry everything forward with known factors. And, state aid is relatively flat, except for COVID-19 stimulus, which has a lot of unknowns at this point. And, we're looking at ways to reduce costs like insurance and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so
And
would
then
you
in
agree?
March, we could get more detailed about specific steps or actions. I guess.
Right, because that gives us a whole nother month as opposed to early February, which is, not far.
Thoughts, Mike?
I think we're right on point. And, we made some adjustments already within the administrative structure with the elimination of the director position. So that will carry over into next year as a reduction from budget to budget. And with the insurances and the various things that we are looking at and targeting at, I think we're showing a lot of awareness of the situation and the expectation of our community. I think we're right on the right track.
We do need to keep in mind that when I projected out the expenses for next year as compared to the revenues, I took into account a lot of knowns, and there was a big gap. And while we've identified some things to narrow down on that gap, I think that we still have some work to do.
Yeah. And that goes right back to our original conversation that I talked in the previous board meeting about as we move forward with our ongoing discussions with the board and the unknowns in the COVID unknowns. I still think by the looks of the vaccine rollout and the various things coming down from DOH and from the state that we are certainly going to be in a social distancing situation come September. So I think in order to run the instructional program that when we get it to the maximum level here soon, as far as capacity goes, in order to maintain that, eliminates a lot of flexibility in our staffing needs and moves. So we've got our work cut out for us to be able to maintain that programming. And of course, that's our priority as a school district. So a lot of work to do, a lot of unknowns, but we'll keep bringing it back.
I feel like a presidential candidate. Can you see the fly?
Oh, look at you. Well played.
So we'll plan on updating the board at the next the next meeting.
February 16th.
Yes, the 16th, sorry. And then that way maybe you'll have a little bit of additional information from the insurance carrier.
Yeah, we might have, the 16th will still be early.
Yeah, so if not.
But definitely by the March where we're supposed to have a meteor discussion, we should definitely have it.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
So we're done?
Yes, I really appreciate the spreadsheets, Meg. I know that's a lot of work, but it really is informative.
Actually, some of them are getting easier as like they were created before, and now I'm just updating them as they go forward. As long as I can find them a year later, we're doing pretty good. So. All right,
All right.
thanks. Have a good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good
You
night.
too. Good night, everyone.